I wasn't the best at writing essays. I haven't written a psychology essay since literally a year ago, but I wrote 2 good ones and therefore I'm qualified to deliver this video. Thank you very much. Right, so hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Saskia. I'm a first year psychology student at the University of Southampton. In today's video I'm going to talk to you about IB psychology. So I did IB psychology from 2018 to 2020. I got a 7. Those are my credentials. You're welcome. I did higher level as well. So you can probably tell by the title I'm going to be talking about how to write a psychology extended response question. Now, I have said before, this was not my strongest suit, but I did have some very good essays compared to my usual. So I would say on average I got between 13 and 15 out of 22, which isn't good. I know, you don't have to tell me, but my short answer questions were so good that it got me 7s. But I did have some very good days when I would get like 90. My first ever psychology essay, I got 21 out of 22. And then we never got that close again. My next closest was in year 13, literally like the last essay before we left because of the world, and I got 19 out of 22, and it made me cry because I'd been writing such bad essays all year and I didn't know how to write them. Like, we were never really taught a structure until year 13, and then my teacher was like, Saskia, you've been doing this wrong since the beginning of time. And I was like, oh, why did no one tell me? Why did no one tell me? Because literally, oh my god, the first essay I got back in year 13, my teacher was like, when I was looking at your predicted grades, I thought I'd get a much better essay. And I was like, oh. And she was like, I'm disappointed. I was like, oh, because my predicted grades were always 7s. So I assumed she thought I was good at essays, but I was only getting these 7s because my paper 3 was really good, my paper 1 was really good, and we'd never done a paper 2 before. So I didn't have to deal with the essays. Like in my paper 2, I got 5. I didn't sit the exam, obviously, because thanks, class of 2020. But in the one mock that we did for paper 2, I think I got a 5. I think I got 28 out of 44, which isn't good. I know, okay? This is just gonna be me defending my poor essay writing skills for the whole 20-minute video. It might be. Look, I wasn't the best at writing essays. I haven't written a psychology essay since literally a year ago, but I wrote 2 good ones and therefore I'm qualified to deliver this video. Thank you very much. We are going to talk about psychology extended response questions. I'm going to call them essays because I don't like ERQ. Like SAQ, fine. ERQ, not for me. So, psychology essays. You will do 1 in paper 1. Whether you're standard or higher level, you will be answering an essay. So, you've got to deal with it. And then in paper 2, you're doing at least 1. If you're standard level, you're doing 1. If you're higher level, oh, welcome baby. You're gonna write 2 essays in that paper and it's gonna make you cry. Paper 2 is everyone's least favourite paper, and if it's your favourite paper, sort yourself out. You're wrong, you're absolutely lying to yourself. I don't know anyone in the IB in my 6th form class that could actually write essays and understood what they were doing. Anyone. Yes, there was only like 7 of us in the class, but still. None of us could write the essays, so 0% able to do essays in psychology IB. So my plan for this video is I'm going to talk to you about the criteria, where you're going to get your marks, what they want, and how many marks you can get in each section. Then we're going to discuss the structure, how to actually write the essay, which is the bit that is the most difficult. And then I'm going to go through 1 essay with you. I have got an example on my phone, I've got an example plan, we're going to talk through how you would write that essay. Everyone ready? Buckle your seatbelts, kids, it's IB psychology time. So, essays are out of 22 marks. They're big, they're very big. Considering your next biggest question 9, it's a very big jump. It's 2.5 times a short answer question, and don't let that convince you in your mind that you're doing 2.5 short answer questions, because you are not. Although you kind of are. Let me explain that in a moment. So, there are 5 criteria for writing an essay. It goes A, B, C, D, E. Learn the alphabet with Saskia. So, criteria A, focus. have you actually focused on the question? So if you get asked a question about social identity theory and you don't talk about social identity theory, you haven't focused on the question. You have not done what the criteria wants. You will not get the 2 marks. I used to think that these were really easy 2 marks to get. Yeah, they're not. You need to be focused on relevant aspects of the question. If the question is asking you to discuss something, are you discussing it? If the question is asking you about biological and you are mentioning sociocultural, and then you're not like linking it back or making it relevant, are you going to get the marks? No. You need your essay to be streamlined, condense it, make it as relevant as you can. You want to stay focused on the question, and it's difficult. We will get there in the structure of how you're going to stay focused on the question, because I could never stay focused on the question. I would just write how I thought I was supposed to write, but like almost forgetting that I was trying to answer a question. So criterion B is knowledge. I'm going to say this is a relatively okay criteria to meet. This is out 6 marks. This is your definitions, your terminology. Do you actually know what you're talking about? This does not include the research. Your research is irrelevant for criteria B. You need to define your words. If you do not define your key terms, this is destroyed. Because you might be using them really well, but no one knows if you know what they mean. You have to explain the big words you're going to talk about. Even things like reliability and validity. You have to tell me what they mean. Pretend I don't know. Pretend whoever is reading your essay has nothing, not a single clue about psychology. You are writing for them. So, define your words and you can quite solidly do well in this criterion. Then we have criteria C, research. Have you actually used research to support your understandings? And has it been relevant research? That is where it is important. You think this might be easy, but if your research isn't relevant to the question, it doesn't matter. It does not matter if you've used the research because it's not linking. The IB says that there is no like specific amount that you should use of research. I'm going to tell you there is 2 minimum. You need 2 studies. Sometimes it's worth throwing a 3rd one in, like a counter study, a counter example, or if you literally just want to mention a point, you can just say, oh, well, in 2 sentences you can say, well, Maguire did this and he found this, which is going against what this person found. Let me discuss that. Your research has to be relevant. On the IB criteria on my phone, relevant is in bold. Bold it in your mind. If it's not relevant, don't even try and include it. Don't even try. Then criterion D, critical thinking. I thought this was easy. It's not that easy. I'm going to read here. It says the areas of critical thinking are research design and methodologies, triangulation, assumptions and biases, contradictory evidence or alternative theories, areas of uncertainty. Those are your 5 critical thinking points. Learn them. Unless the question is asking you to like talk about research methodology, please do not put all of your effort into saying, oh, well, this one has high ecological validity and this one doesn't. Because it's not important. I don't want to see the same point repeated over and over again about the ecological validity unless it's incredibly relevant to what you're trying to say. And chances are, it's not. You want to be using relevant critical thinking. Every study will have something that you can say is wrong with it, but you do not have to always mention it. It's not always relevant to what you're trying to say. Then we have criterion E, which is organisation and clarity. This is only worth 2 marks, and again, you might think, oh, easy, really easy marks. Yeah, no, I never really got 2 marks in this bit. It's harder than you might think, because you need to, for organisation and clarity, it's talking about your structure. And a lot of the time, people don't know how to structure an essay, which means they just lose these marks because the examiner, they did not plan it. They did not know where they were going with this essay, and they've just shoved random points in. I'm talking to myself here. I did not know how to structure an essay, and I still don't really. So you need your essay to be organised, you need it to be coherent, and it needs to flow. Don't just jump from research to research if they're not linking together, if they're not relevant. So, those are the criterion. Now, let's talk about the command word. They are important, much more important than you might think. So, you tend to kind of get discuss questions. Discuss is a balanced review. 1 side, 2 side, but it's balanced. Evaluate is probably the next easiest command term. because this is very similar to discuss, but evaluating strengths limitations. Simple as that. Sometimes you'll get a question, I remember one of my mocks was evaluate research on prosocial behaviour. It didn't really care about, the prosocial behaviour. Evaluate research. The word that comes after evaluate is often very useful, because I knew from that I wasn't evaluating the theory, I was evaluating the research. Then, to what extent? You have to say to what extent in this essay. You can't just, present an opinion, but not conclude an opinion. You have to come to a conclusion and say, your question might be like, to what extent do biological factors play a part in the development of major depressive disorder? So you need to say genetic and biological factors play a very large role, as supported by this and this and this. And then we have contrast. I've never had a contrast question, but I've seen them and I don't want to do them. So contrast, differences, not similarities, differences. So you might get asked contrast two models of memory. You don't want the similarities. How are they different? Tell me. I'm pretty sure those are the only questions they can ask you, beginning bits. That's what I've got on my phone. So we have talked about the criterion, we've talked about the command terms. Let's talk structure. How are we writing an essay? So you need an introduction. You always need an introduction. Always. In your introduction, define everything. All the relevant words you need to define. So if you're going to be talking, if your question is discuss the reliability of diagnosis, what do you need to define? Reliability of diagnosis. Not just reliability, that's not relevant. The reliability of a diagnosis, what does that mean? And if you're talking about a specific disorder, what is that disorder? You need to define everything, because this is going to get you your knowledge marks. You need to show them that you actually know what these words mean and you actually understand what the question is asking you. Because if you show them that you understand what the question is asking you, you're more likely to get your criterion A marks, because you've shown them that you are actually going to focus on the question. You kind of want to set out a plan in your introduction without telling them, in this essay I'm going to discuss. Don't. I hate when someone puts I in an essay. Don't do it. You just set it up for them. You say reliability of diagnosis has been, widely argued. Some supporting evidence such as this, and some against evidence like this. And then you've told them what you're going to talk about without telling them. So, introduction. Tell them what you're going to talk about. Define all your key terms. So if your question is about, reliability of diagnosis, what are they being diagnosed with? What's your disorder? And then what's a reliability of diagnosis? And then why is that a thing? What's your question asking you to do about the diagnosis? Reliability of diagnosis is widely argued, it's controversial, is it? That kind of thing. Move on to the bit that people tend to get confused with. These are the main body paragraphs of your essay. So, first of all, your theory. Explain it. Sometimes there is not a theory. If you're talking about a model of memory, explain the model of memory. You can go into as much detail as you want. You have an hour, but remember your focus shouldn't all be here. Your theory is only contributing to your knowledge marks. It's not really going to get you the research marks, and unless you're going to critically analyse it or assess it, it's not going to get you criterion D. This is a small part of criterion B. You need to say it so they know what you're talking about, but don't spend forever on it. Then, research. I would always first go for supporting evidence, because it's easier. So, we're doing social identity theory, let's say that. What study supports it? Oh, well, these people found this, and it supports this theory by this. Aim, method, findings, conclusion. You don't always have to put the aim. I don't ever explicitly say, they wanted to find out this. I would just say, they study social identity theory. Let's tell you about it. So, yes, you want to give them your research, tell them all about it, and show that you actually kind of know what they were talking about. You don't have to put details in. Sometimes it's worth shoving in, how many participants there were, but it's not always. If you can't think of it, don't. It's fine. It's perfectly fine to not know. So then you want to kind of very quickly evaluate the study. Not a lot, because it's not about the study, it's about the theory. And you want to say, oh, you know, well, this is quite a valid study because of this. It was highly controlled. This, oh, but it's a little bit old, so, you know, take it with a grain of salt, that kind of thing. But obviously in a more formal manner, because you can't say take it with a grain of salt in an IB essay. You want to link that back to the theory. How does it show the theory? This is like the last section in a short answer question, linking it back to the top. What does it mean? How does it show the theory? You also will need to evaluate the theory at some point. Well, it depends on what your question is, but let's say you have to evaluate the theory. You will eventually, at some point, need to be you want to be embedding this into your argument. So like when you're explaining the theory, if you say that it was developed a very long time ago, you can straight away put in a point there and be like, well, temporal validity. You know? You can straight away be like, well, here's me showing you that I'm already critically analysing this. Like I already am showing you I understand this. Then when you're linking your study back to the theory, you can do a little bit more critical analysis then. So you can say, well, there's not really much empirical support for this, or, oh, there is a lot of empirical support for this. Oh, well, the empirical support is rubbish. Obviously not like that, but kind of like that. And then you basically do that twice. So your paragraph on theory and research, twice. Obviously, unless you're doing, you know, like an entire question on social identity theory, you don't need to repeat the theory. You would then just say like, oh, well, on the other hand, someone studied this. Or you could say like, people might think there's a bias in this theory, so they studied if there was a bias in the theory. And they found, oh, there was not one. And things like that. And then, just after that, before you're concluding, you want to show them a little bit more knowledge. Not necessarily like a study, but you want to show them a little bit more analysis of the theory. You need to show them just any points you maybe haven't already mentioned in the other bits of your essay. Maybe just kind of say, oh, you know, this study doesn't have good contract validity. What is it? Teacup, testable, empirical evidence, assumptions and biases, construct validity. I don't know what U is. Predictability. That's a thing, isn't it? Or did my teacher make that up? We had teacup, how you assess a theory. But, you know, you want to embed that throughout your essay, but you also want to kind of do a tiny section at the end being like, well, here's what you missed. And then your conclusion should not be long, okay? Your conclusion is no new information, nothing new. You are literally summarising it. You are saying, well, on the one hand, there is supporting evidence, on the other hand, there is contrasting evidence, but, you know, the contrasting evidence is really weak, so we're led to, you know, more believe the supporting evidence. Oh, but the supporting evidence has low temporal validity, so, you know, we would need more recent supporting evidence. Something like that. You don't have to end on a nice, like, concluding sentence. So, we are on the example question. This is, I think, from the 2019 May paper, so I'm pretty sure this was in my mock. So, discuss one or more biases in thinking or decision making. So what we're underlining, discuss, your key term, you need to offer a range of arguments, factors and hypotheses in a balanced way. Present your opinions with evidence. You can then do one or more biases. If you only remember one, perfect, stick to one. Sometimes it's helpful to do two so you can contrast the theories, the biases. Then, thinking and or decision making. Do you want to do thinking, decision making, or both? You know, you can pick. So, in your introduction, what are you going to say? Well, you're probably going to discuss what a bias is and where these biases come from. So, we are going to talk about anchoring bias and availability heuristics, which are a part of System 1 thinking. So, you're going to talk about the dual process model. In your introduction, you will say, well, the dual process model is this, but, you know, part of the dual process model is System 1, you know, this kind of lazy, effortless thinking, which can lead to biases, heuristics, cognitive shortcuts, etc. Oh, an example of this cognitive shortcut would be availability heuristics. Another example would be anchoring bias. So, you know, define them. What is an anchoring bias? What is an availability heuristics? And then you need to support them with evidence. So we've done our introduction. You know, we're gonna talk about anchoring bias first because it's the first one I've spotted. We have English and Musweiler? We're gonna talk about that study. It's the law student's rape case, that one. talk about that. Then, how does it show anchoring bias? We're going to talk about the bias and, oh, this is evidence for it. Is it good evidence for it? Like, is it relevant? Is it okay? So you want to say a little bit about study and like if it's actually any good. And then you want to kind of say, well, anchoring bias, like, it doesn't have much evidence, or it does have a lot of evidence, or, you know, you want to kind of talk about anchoring bias. You can say like, oh, well, we can actually measure anchoring bias. Like, very easily we can empirically measure anchoring bias, so it's quite easy to find support for it and things like that. Then you move on, next paragraph, oh, well, another kind of bias in thinking and or decision making, I don't know which one it is an availability heuristic. You might want to repeat what an availability heuristic is. You don't have to. If you think it kind of flows well and you know a definition is good, put it in, it might be helpful. But like if you think it's going to kind of clog things up, don't bother. So then we have Kahneman and Tversky? I don't remember this study, I don't think I ever learnt it, it was just one I found in one of my notes. So we're going to talk about that. What does it show? Does it show availability heuristic? And why? And then similarly to the anchoring bias one, you know, can we measure availability heuristics? Like, are they a thing? Can we prove that they're a thing? And in this essay you can do, you know, you could pick to do only anchoring bias and then do one for and one against. We never learned an against anchoring bias study, so I could not tell you one. But you know, you can do, because you're allowed to do one or more theories of thinking and or decision making, you kind of have like a potential of like 3 or 4 different questions you could actually answer here. So if you only know about anchoring bias, you've got your one theory in thinking or decision making, you've got it. Like, you can answer this kind of however you want to. And then you're going to just conclude, say, well, you know, there's a lot of evidence for this. You can very easily test these biases and they show great support for, you know, the dual process model, that kind of thing. And I know that this example is not the best essay example plan, but basically it's the only one I could find in my notes. So I know that this last part of the video about the essay was probably not the most helpful thing, but hopefully me talking about, you know, how to structure the essay and what the criterion are was helpful in some way. I hope this was helpful in some way. I know that my IB psychology videos tend to do relatively well because there just doesn't seem to be that many videos about IB psychology. So yes, hopefully this was helpful in some way, shape or form, and hopefully it helps you write an essay. Remember, your essays don't have to be that great. Focus on your short answer questions, because in paper 1 that's where they're important. You need to be able to write a solid essay. Like, not great, not even necessarily good, but just it needs to get you enough marks to kind of get a solid like 4 or 5 in paper 2, which is hard. But with practice, that's the thing, you have to just practice essays. It's not fun, but our teacher used to set us an essay like every 2 weeks on a Friday. We'd get set an essay and I would write an essay every single Saturday for the sake of it, because I knew that essays were not my strongest suit, and I knew that essays were a pretty big chunk of the IB and I had to be able to do them, and my paper 2 wasn't the strongest, so I was like, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to learn how to write an essay, and I learned how to write an essay. Yes, hopefully that video was helpful in some way, shape or form, and hopefully everyone does pretty well in the IB. I don't know how exams are going to happen this year, but hopefully everything is good and everyone does well, and we will smash those essays. This is